What was the biggest thing that you had to face internally over the last few years once you started to realize this as your kids are getting older and you're like, oh, I need to step up in a different way? What was that thing that you needed to face within yourself?
I mean, sitting down, there was a moment my wife and I had a confrontation in my little basement gym, and I left the house and checked into a hotel when I was writing this latest book.
Really? Like an argument or some type of...
Yeah, the way it went down was I've worked in education for 20 years, which means I've worked for nonprofits for 20 years. And I've been on salary and working on call 24/7, 365, hospitals all night. You get up the next morning, you go back to work. That's just the job, and you get a paycheck. This whole, if you write another book, you'll get paid again. If you go do the speaking gig, this is a whole new world. And it was exciting and wild, and I didn't have an off switch. I didn't know what that meant. But I did know that kid who grew up pretty poor with a dad who was a police officer and a minister, we're going to have groceries all the time. And so you hit the gas and you start looking for esteem and book sales and all these things. It's an old cliche. And what happened, my manager called and said, hey, we got these 2 speaking gigs you really wanted. And I was cheering in my basement, cheering, like, yeah. And my wife came downstairs. She says, what are you cheering? And she was smiling, like, what are you cheering about? And I said, I got this one gig and I'm pretty sure we got the other one. And her way of dealing with conflict, she's very wise, and she usually will step back. And plus, I'm a lot, right? She'll step back and we'll circle back, and she'll say, "Hey, I want to talk about what happened yesterday." She didn't do that this time. She stepped into my space, which is rare, and she said,
"Your gym is kind of your sanctuary, or your safe space,
your
man cave."
Well, and I'm super excited. I'm all sweaty. I'm cheering, and she said, "I'm watching my husband die."
Oh,
and she said, "The pie piece for how much I love you, and the pie piece for how much money you make is full." And then she said, "You could take these speaking gigs. Great. I'm not going to hold you back. But do not say this is for me or for the kids or for our legacy. This is for your ego."
Wow.
And then she said something it floored me. She said, "John, we have enough." And Lewis, I didn't have a psychology for that word. I didn't know what that meant. I was a poor kid who was trying to prove myself. And I don't have 2 PhDs because I'm just super smart.
No, it's because you wanted to prove yourself.
I'm trying to prove myself. Yeah. My sister was smart. My little brother was smart. And I was a dumb jock. I'll show you, right? And so you just keep going, and it's never enough. And so I went checked into a hotel with this manuscript. And as I went through it, it was like, you're not living this. You're not living this.
Your book manuscript that you wrote.
That's right. Well, I was halfway through.
You were writing it.
And so it quickly turned from here's what you need to do, to me getting a bar stool and pulling up and being like, hey guys, I'll order one too. Let's figure this out. And so that was hard, because it was a matter of you got to go see. And you and I, we talked off air, I had to go, you challenged me privately, and I had to go see a trauma counselor and have some conversations I had never had.
Wow. When was this?
This is within the last year and a half. I mean, this isn't long ago. And I'm here, right? We have the book. I've got the radio show. I've got the stuff. And it's almost like the floor keeps okay, now you're ready for the next level. Whoosh. And now you're not ready for the next level. Whoosh. If you're willing to put the work in, I think the paths open themselves up.
Where were you most anxious in your life during that time? What was that anxiety running through your head? That I'm not enough, even if my wife says we have enough, or what was the...
Well, it was one of those, so I preach all the time about connection and friendship. I preach all the time about reality. I preach all the time about health and healing, dealing with your old traumas and all this. And dude, I had a #1 best-selling book, Lewis. All my dreams came true. Mm-hmm. And then you hit the road. And then you're doing a podcast. And then you go to this meeting, and you got this interview, and you do this.
Speaking gigs and this, yeah.
You're on the road. And I looked up, and I remember I was in an SUV when the head of publishing had his cell phone. We were going to a book signing, and he handed it back behind me, and handed it to me. And it said, #1. This is my last book. He pulled over.
I feel good.
It was awesome. We pulled over. Dave Ramsey calls me, first call, and he's screaming, "All right." I called my mom and I called my wife. And then we pulled over to a liquor store, and we got some champagne, and we had it in plastic cups in the car. Went to the book signing, and then I went home, and I waited for all my buddies to call. And they didn't call. They didn't know. And I felt weird, because I was like, I haven't talked to you guys in 9 months. These are my best friends on the planet. I skipped all of our monthly meetings. I skipped our phone calls because I was on the road. I was doing this. And I realized I gone back into old patterns of isolation and loneliness and trying to think my way through things. I'd started skipping workouts. I put the extra fries on there, and it was slow.
Right.
And I started reading a lot of comments and internalizing that stuff, right? And you keep going down that path, and suddenly your body quietly starts sounding the alarms. And I found myself an anxious mess. And it was my wife, who had been down the road with me before, who was like, man, I remember this guy. Because her body starts saying, you remember last time he did this? Yeah. And so I think it was all of it, man. And I think anybody that wants to snake oil it and say, it's just this one thing or just this one thing, I think that's too reductionistic. We've created a chaotic life, and we try to call it normal. Wow. And then we're out there playing whack-a-mole with symptoms, right? And so I think it's tackling it head on, walking into the anxiety and saying, all right, I'm going towards the alarms. What's on fire? Let's figure that out.
Wow. What was the conversations you've had with your wife since then, since that moment where you went to the hotel and kind of started doing that work? What commitment have you made and she made to support you guys over the last year and a half since then?
So I'm actually busier now than I was, but it's an intentional busy with a finish line, and a seasonality to it, right?
Right.
If we were to go into winter and the meteorologists were like, we'll let you know when warm's coming, it would be a disaster. Or that crazy heat wave we've had this last summer. It's different when you know, like come March, the sun comes back out, right? And so in July of this year, we knew
there's a book coming out.
Book comes out this fall. I'm going to be on the road. I'm going to be busy. Let's start putting relational deposits in the account now. Let's be fully present with kids. Let's not be on the road for the next 2 months. That means we're going to sacrifice some money. That means we're going to sacrifice some X and some Y and some Z. I want you to come home a little bit early. I'm going to pick the kids up from school when I can. It's these little bitty things that are not the big flashy things.
It's not Instagrammable moments. It's not highlights. It's not
It is leaning
awards.
over with my 7-year-old daughter and saying, you gonna play dominoes? I'm gonna dominate you. And she says, bring it, old man.
Wow.
Right? And she's 7 and we play dominoes. There's no Instagram story there.
Right.
But there's a hug right before she goes to bed that says, right? And that is what will buy me 3 months on the road. People still have to go get deployed. People still have to go do crazy things. They have to go build businesses. Look at the world. We need that. But you have to know, we got to do it in seasons. I got to do it with intentionality, and we have to stay connected to other people. That's why men who learn how to be vulnerable, that's why women who have been through, especially women who have been through abusive situations, who are willing to tread into scary territory and be vulnerable again and potentially get hurt again.
Right. And open their hearts again. Yeah, it's hard.
But that's a powerful, brave move because there's no model.